G'day guys and welcome back to the Back Pocket Plug Up podcast. My name is Cade McDonald. I am joined by my co-host Connor Rogers. Rogie, how are you, mate?
I'm very good, mate, but something tells me I'm not as good as you. You must be absolutely walking on air, feeling like you're arriving at the gates of heaven, and behind those gates is everything you could possibly dream of. I'm jealous, but I want to know exactly how are you feeling in this moment?
Oh, it's relief. It's just overjoy. It is just so exciting. I remember this time last week at the end of the episode, you go, in a week's time, we'll know if the D's are into the granny. And that really made me nervous. I'm going, oh, geez, that's true. And then that week took an absolute eternity. It was one of the longest weeks I've ever been a part of. Every day, every sleep was just obsessing about the game. And it couldn't have been any easier, to be honest. The boys got it done in emphatic fashion. And yes, the Melbourne Footy Club are through to a grand final. So it's an unbelievable time to be alive.
Would you say, and I don't want to put a potential downer on it, but I don't think it would be a downer, will be a downer. Is the feeling you're riding at the moment and the excitement and the energy, is it what you expected? Is it overwhelming? Is it exactly where you expected it to be? Underwhelming? Where do you see it?
I could go really deep on this, and I probably won't. But it's so exciting, and it's like it's quite funny. Like I'll watch some of the highlights back, and I'll start fist pumping again with excitement. Like it is just an amazing feeling. But it's one of those ones that could get spoilt because it's like we were 9-0, but yeah, you're holding it in. You're keeping a lid on it. We finished first on, at the end of round 23 with the kick after the siren. Overjoyed with excitement, but you don't get carried away because you haven't really achieved anything. You smash 2 finals and you're into a grand final, and it's like this relief and excitement, but there's still a bit of a sort of a strangle on the emotions because you don't want to over celebrate, and you don't want to celebrate for nothing. So I feel sort of, I don't know, it feels like it's a little bit empty because we're not there yet. And it would just be a shame to lose in a couple of weeks because it's like, I feel like there's something bubbling away that could really come out if we do win. So it's a weird feeling, to be honest. I've never really felt anything like it.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I would think that making a grand final is a cause worthy of celebration. Even if you do lose it, I still think these 2 weeks you should be allowed to really celebrate and let your hair down. I think that's why they say that the preliminary finals are more nerve-wracking than the grand final, because to get so close to making a grand final and not make it is heartbreaking. But at least if you make a grand final and even if you lose it, it's still incredibly heartbreaking. But just to make a grand final and be able to have the week or two beforehand, I think you are entitled to a bit of celebration and stop being so reserved with your Melbourne excitement.
Yeah, 100%. What I do like is I've gone on Twitter and all sort of social media, and the articles coming out about the whole club. It's this whole celebration of the footy club, and the Bulldogs are getting the exact same treatment. But I'm on Twitter, and the amount of articles popping up about the 20 moments that, made the rebuild successful. And I'm going, oh, is the rebuild successful? Like, it is. Like, we've made a grand final with this group. This is a successful group now. Like, it's not a question of, like, is this a premiership tilting team? It's like, we are. Like, the rebuild is successful by definition because we've made the grand final. So, like, I was watching every sort of footy show last night, and they were doing big 5 to 8 minute sort of stints on the Melbourne Footy Club and the rebuild and where the picks came from, and they're celebrating the draft stories of so many players. So I am appreciating the big overall celebration of the footy club. And one other thing that is really getting me sort of borderline just fired up and emotional and excited is all the streamers and stuff in the streets, all the paintings of fences, all the paintings of roads, all the D's stuff littered throughout the town.
Blokes walking down the streets with their D's Guernsey on, and kids with their D's Guernsey and caps on. It's
just so exciting because when I tell the story about why I go for Melbourne, I talk about how my dad came over from Scotland. He was 6 years old. He was born in 1958. Got to Melbourne in 1964. He got to school and all the kids are going, what footy team do you go for? And he's looking around at the newsagents and there's parades and the school's littered in red and blue. And he goes, I go for the red and blue team. And that was Melbourne. And the reason, there's stuff everywhere is because we were in the grand final. So I tell that story quite often. And
Ron Barassi stuff.
And now that I'm looking around the town and there's stuff everywhere, it reminds me of why my dad chose the Melbourne Footy Club, and it's like,
Jay, that's good.
Like all the streamers and all the flags and all the excitement. It's just, it was unbelievable. And yeah, I can't believe it really.
Back in the glory days, this is why winning premierships is so important. It's not just for giving your supporters their just desserts for the years of dedication they put into your club. But when I was the glory days of working at the AFL store, when you had Hawthorn win 3 flags in a row, when you had the Tigers win three flags in 4 years or whatever it was, the supporters came out in droves and new supporters jumped on board. There's that many, not just bandwagoners, people changing clubs or whatnot, but kids who perhaps didn't have much of an interest in footy. They're looking to get an interest in footy. They see Richmond winning 2-3 flags, see Hawthorn winning 3 flags. All of a sudden, all the kids in the schools are supporting the same team, or so many of them. And your supporters and your membership for the next 100 years goes through the roof.
You genuinely can snag a new generation. And that's so evident because I know a lot of mates my age who go for Essendon and their parents don't. And that was because Essendon were successful at that sort of 5 to 6 year old mark when we were young. I know a couple of mates who go for Brisbane and their parents don't. And it's like, why do you go for Brisbane? And it's because they were so successful when we were at that age, at that 6 or 7 age, when you're getting into footy. So it is so important to rejuvenate your supporter base and to get new generations of supporters in. And we haven't done that for 25 years. So it's...
I was about to say, poor old Carlton will be hitting Gold Coast numbers if we gave this up for the 5 more years. Should we get into the headline, McDonald?
Let's rip in. Let's do it.
Now, I've thrown a bit of a curveball in here. We send each other the run sheet before every show, and I've thrown a red herring because the headline I've sent you is not the headline we're running with on Dawson Roger Limited.
It's a real shame because this one is a beauty.
Yeah, it's just big capital letters, we told you so. Now... We told you so on a couple of fronts. Now, we're not here to Bigfoot, big note. We're not here to just talk about, we've said a lot of outlandish calls this season, so it wouldn't surprise me if you went through the history books and there's a lot we got wrong. But 2, we definitely got right. We called it early. Well, I did, and you were a bit hesitant too, but I know deep down you thought the same thing. You just didn't want to say it and jinx you. Is that the D's are winning the flag, or they are the number 1 contender, and Port Adelaide are the number 1 pretenders. And, we were getting into dicey waters. Port Adelaide was starting to, quote, unquote, prove us wrong. But deep down, you and I both knew. We knew. We're just waiting for them to fall. And boy, oh boy, did they fall like Humpty Dumpty levels of falling.
Well, I remember you asked me a couple of weeks ago on the pod, you're like, who would you prefer to play in the grand final if the D's were to make it? And I go... Honestly, out of Brisbane, Western Bulldogs and Port, probably Port. And we almost giggled at all the controversy that would cause because all year we said Port Adelaide, they cannot compete with the top 4 and they sort of pick and choose when they rock up at times, at notable times. I think the sort of rundown was Brisbane, West Coast. There's a couple other results, maybe the Bulldogs result early in the season, but they had results where they just did not turn up, and especially against top 4 sides. And it's just so funny because, obviously the Bulldogs got the job done on the weekend, and there was a part of me that wasn't surprised. As surprised as I was in the context of that week. Port Adelaide had won through to the prelim. They've got the only home prelim. They've had the only home finals, well, besides Brisbane. They've had the only home finals in the whole, final series. They get the home prelim. They're versing Western Bulldogs, who fell off the face of the earth. They lost to Essendon, Hawthorn, and Port leading into the final series. They were gone for all money, and yeah. So in the context of that week, I'm going, well, geez, Port just get this done, and it might not be close. But once Western Bulldogs got out to the start, I went, well, hang on. Of course this was going to happen.
Well, we've said as well, and we weren't the only ones to say this, but for the majority of the year, the Dogs were the premiership favourites, and I think you do have to look at season form and not just the most recent form, because it all counts. The first 12 rounds don't count for nothing. That there is genuine substance there. But before we get into the Dogs Port game properly, I know we touched on it a bit already, but let's go properly into the Demons game. Now, the headline originally that I sent you was, I'm gone here tonight, because they're calling it the best ruck performance of all time, and it's certainly the best ruck performance I've ever seen. But I think my opinion on the game doesn't really count for much when I've got the number one ticket holder of the Melbourne Football Club with me. What were your actual thoughts about the game itself, how it panned out? Was it what you expected? And just how happy are you with that performance?
The perfect performance. It's probably the best game I've ever seen. I probably won't see a better game in my life, I don't think, especially in a prelim final. I expect us and hope that we can contend in years to come, and I'm not going to be sitting at the MCG in 12 months, in 24 months, in 36 months watching prelim finals like that. I don't think I'll ever see that again. So I was just so impressed. And the way that they've tapered their run to sort of peak at the right time, I just think so impressive. But the game itself, I thought we could get it done by 5-6 goals. The closer it got, the more nervous I got. But I felt like we were a class above Geelong, and their recent form, I think they lost 4 of the last 6 or something. Their form coming in was really, really sketchy. But yeah, Maxi Gawn, that third term was something to behold, and he sort of epitomised the Melbourne Footy Club changing culture in recent times, and that goal after the siren to make us minor premiers felt really significant, and then his third quarter felt really significant as well on the weekend. He was kicking goals out of his behind from all sorts of angles. He was kicking them on the run, and
He was kicking goals that would be sort of 1 in 5 to 1 in 10 stuff, and he was just hitting them one after the other. It was under the most heat you could ever wish to be in a preliminary final. It was certainly as good a big man performance as I've ever seen, and it was tackles across the ground.
I was going to say that one of my favourite moments was Gary Rowan running away, who's absolute speed demon, picks it up on the wing, looks up, sees Max Gawn behind him, goes, see you later. And Max Gawn just charges him down and lays a brutal tackle. I think that was in the third term as well. So Max Gawn was just inspired. He inspired the whole group. And it was just a perfect performance. I don't think I'll ever see a better performance from the Melbourne Footy Club. Hopefully they can do half as well as that in the grand final. I think we'll go a long way if the pressure and the defence and everything hums like it did on Friday night. But they've really just put themselves in the best position we've ever been in 57 years. So I couldn't have been prouder. How did you see it all unfolding?
Well, before we talk about more of the individual performances, before the game even started, seeing Goodwin in the rooms with the boys, it was so hard to explain how just in tune they all looked. It was like they were all on the exact same wavelength when he pulled him in, looking up at the whiteboard, and he wasn't there doing the big sort of aggressive or loud, go on boys, this is our day, we're storming into a grand final. He was so cool, calm and calculated, and it was like he had the boys in the palm of his hand, and it was like he didn't even need to say anything because they all knew what they had to do. They all have that much faith and trust in each other. And maybe I've got that completely wrong. There was no volume, and I was just watching them look up at a whiteboard, and that was my take on it. But just from looking at their demeanour in the rooms, there was not the slightest sign of nerves, and it convinced me that they were going to win from the outset. Then they roll onto the ground, and they're arm in arm, which I think is the only way to go after we've seen how the power stance has gone for
100%.
Adelaide previously. How Geelong could have possibly thought anything but arm in arm could be the go is beyond me. The only possible explanation is if there was COVID rule, or they thought there was COVID rules where they couldn't be arm in arm before the game because I don't think they can be arm in arm when they sing the song. Maybe that was the logic. And then when they saw Demons arm in arm, they had too much pride to change into arm in arm. I'm not sure what the go is, but the only thing I do know is that the arm in arm looks that much better than that pathetic power stance. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, Geelong, it's easy to criticise in hindsight, but they look disinterested at the national anthem. And Melbourne, the arm in arm, the connectiveness, and the steely look, and that brotherhood, and that sort of we're going to war is just so inspiring. When I saw that straight away, that was like pound your chest type stuff. Like, let's get it going. Let's get the game underway.
Absolutely. Then on top of that, on top of the steely look of Goodwin in the rooms with all the players buying in, and the arm-in-arm nature of their stand out there when Geelong had horrible body language, you have Gary Lyon, and I don't know if you've seen it yet because you were watching the Channel 7 coverage, I believe.
No, I did see it.
Gary Lyon pouring his heart out before the game, trying his hardest to keep a lid on it, but it was like he was about to cry. I've never seen a more excited and nervous man in his life. Me being the hopeless romantic when it comes to football and life as it is, I almost got a bit emotional watching him because you saw in one man's voice, you saw the 60, 58, 59 years, however long you've been waiting. You saw the wait. You saw how much it means to all the Melbourne supporters. And then they're showing photos of Neil Danaher. And you just couldn't help but feel this is a Demons day. This is a Demons time. There is no way Geelong are raining on this parade. The ball gets bounced up and all the things we've already mentioned come to the fore. And Jack Viney's cracking in as tough as guts. He's played the best game he's played for a long time. And which I'm stoked about because when people talk about the Melbourne midfield and the Melbourne A-graders, Viney's been lost in the shuffle. He's sort of like, we know he's a good footballer, but he's not going to win you a game. He's not a match winner. He's not an Oliver or a Petrarca or a Cossie Pickett or a Gorney or any of the May Lever. He's not in that category anymore, but he's just come out and prove that he is. Prove that he can still be that genuine A-grade match winner with pure toughness, and he's built for finals, Jack Viney.
Well, yeah, he was sort of bandied around at a couple of clubs, and I was looking at in terms of the rumours. He's always been a required player at the Melbourne Footy Club, if not the sort of upper echelon player at the Melbourne Footy Club. He's a best and fairest winner. He has been getting 23, 24 touches since he debuted, and he sort of had a similar path to Ollie Wines. They came in quite hot. I think Ollie Wines is probably a little bit ahead of him and probably has been the whole time, but they both came in quite hot in their first years, and then they went a little bit quiet. But he's had issues with his feet and issues with injuries throughout his career, but every time he's in, we're a better side. And some of the rumours last year about him going to Essendon or Geelong or potentially Carlton, I did see on like the fan forums, it was sort of like, we don't want this sort of B-grade player or C-grade player. Like, some of the external opinions of Jack Viney is that he's a bit bang average, but he is just an absolute contested ball animal. He's sort of our defensive mid in a way. So it allows Track and Oliver, who do run two ways, but allows them to get off the chain a little bit more. And he sort of turned back the clock to his BNF year, and it was just an unbelievable performance. And I think Ben Brown was outstanding. I think
just taking the ball at his highest point, when he's marking it like that, when he's got the hands out in front and he's running and jumping, he's unstoppable, Ben Brown. And it's going to be one of these stories of the grand final, especially if the D's do win, to be turfed out from the Wooden Spooners. And, he was plucked out of obscurity in the first place when he even went to North Melbourne, mature age recruit, I believe. So to be on this journey and move over to the D's and be the premiership winning full forward, it'd be a remarkable story.
So, Benny Brown was just... just everyone. Everyone was so good. Like Charlie Spargo at ground level. Someone else I think's been a little bit underrated is Cossie Pickett. He kicked 3. He kicked 3 against the Lions. He's had 40 goals this year. I did see something on Twitter. And I know you can't really compare the pair, but it's quite interesting that Jeff Farmer in his first 20 games had 36 goals. Cyril Rioli in his first 20-odd games or first 2 seasons had 21 goals. And Cossie Pickett, I think he's played a couple more games than them, but he's had 40 goals in his first 2 seasons. It's right up there with some of the best small forwards ever.
Well, I think I messaged you and I said I wouldn't be surprised. You don't want to make a big call on someone too early because anything can happen, but what I can say is that I certainly wouldn't be surprised if he goes down in history as the best small forward of all time.
Well, and that's the conversations that have sort of been had at the start of the year, and the comparisons that he's getting compared to aren't unreasonable. And I know that when people do compare people quite prematurely, there's a lot of, all right, well, this guy's overrated now. And I hate that sort of mindset from Australians, because I did see at the start of the year, can Cozzy Pickett be Cyril? Can he be this? Can he be that? And then now, whenever there's a Cozzy Pickett post, the comments are, this guy's overrated. But if you just got to appreciate him. He's 19, 20 years old. And if you don't appreciate him from this point of his career, you're going to miss some of the magic that he's going to produce, because he is unbelievable.
Well, when you say 19, sometimes you don't fully grasp how young 19 is. You know, a year out of high school, to be doing what he's so composed, strong, athletic, and so smart of a footballer as well.
He's a mongrel as well.
Yeah, so tough. He seemingly has it all. He can take the high mark, he can kick the miraculous goal, and he's a reliable set shot as well. You know, there's nothing really lacking from Cozzy, and I look forward to the day where it might be another 3 years from now. It might be faster. Who knows with how strong your midfield is. I look forward to when he's a 60% forward or 70% forward, 30% mid, and he's exploding out of the guts. I think that'll be coming at some point as well.
Yeah, for sure. But it was just one of the all-time great performances. I don't think I'll be privileged enough to witness something. Well, hopefully I am, but it was so perfect, and especially against Geelong, a team that a lot of Melbourne supporters are quite aware of, has had our measure for a number of years, and over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been edging closer and closer and closer to being able to match it with them. We pinched a couple of games, or maybe one game in 2018 after losing a couple of close ones, and then got blown out in 2019. It's just been this process of climbing our way up to being competitive with the best, and to come up against Geelong and get it done, it sort of releases us from those shackles that were 100% there. The mental scarring and the sort of submissiveness of the football we've played against this footy club is now gone. The fear is now gone, and it definitely feels like a new leaf and a real fresh start for our mindset. I don't fear any game on the fixture next year when I get the membership and I put the fixture magnet on the fridge. There's no game I fear anymore, and it just feels like a really fresh new era for the Melbourne Footy Club.
It was an absolutely irresistible performance. You could do no wrong anywhere over the ground, whether it came to desire and want of the contested ball or whether it came to structure and strategy. But that was the difference for mine, and I'm not in any way, shape or form knocking the Dogs' performance. How could you? They've come out and won a prelim by 70 points. It was outstanding. But the main difference for me when we're trying to analyse who is the favourite heading into next week, and who played the better prelim final, when I look at the D's game, I think they played the perfect game of football structurally. It was like they were impenetrable all over the ground. And with the Dogs' performance, very similar, and it's hard to split the two. But I think Dogs just came down more to desire. At every single contest, they wanted the ball more. They surged the ball forward. They ran on, and they just wanted it that much more than Port Adelaide. Yeah. So while that is incredible, and it could win them a grand final, no doubt, I look at that, and it came down to more Richmond-style rushing the ball forward. And whereas the D's, it seemed more structure, and just you could do no wrong because you're just so disciplined. So it's going to be an interesting contest, that discipline. But the D's definitely have the desire as well. But it's that discipline and that belief in the structure and that team coherency up against that pure excitement machine that is the Western Bulldogs handball game. Sets up for one of the all-time grand finals.
Yeah, it is very intriguing. Nick Riewoldt labelled the Melbourne-Geelong game a glorified practice match, or a glorified training drill. I just can't believe some of the conversations coming out of that game.
Before we get into the Dogs and the Power preliminary final, I think it's best we talk about the Cats just for a quick moment here as well. Obviously, the D's were unstoppable, absolutely irresistible. But what do you think this means for the Geelong Football Club? Is it blind through them for the next 5 years as they rebuild? Or do you think that maybe they've got another year left in the tank?
Nah, I feel like they've got to change the philosophy and freshen it up a little bit. It just needs a real freshen up. I don't think a Higgins, Dalhouse, a Rowan can all play in the same side. They're just not offering that youthful exuberance that you can get from younger players. And we spoke about like Port Adelaide when they brought Butters, Dersma, Rosie, the D's with one draft crop, got Cozzy, Jackson, Rivers, and just that injection of like, you know, whatever percentage of your 22 that is. It's just so fresh and so exciting. And the only worrying thing is I don't think they have the draft picks to do it, but they do have the players on the list to do it, quite funnily. So,
well, that's the big dilemma is, do they need to rebuild? Yeah, I think everyone would agree that they can. Can anybody see them, the improvement in their list coming next year to overtake the D's or the Dogs or Power? I can't see it happening, not with, you know, all these players getting another year older. But the dilemma is, you know, do they need to rebuild? Yes. Can they? They probably can't. When you're giving up 3 first-round picks for Jeremy Cameron, I don't think the year after you can then say, we're going to rebuild. You've just given away 3 first-round draft picks. They put all their eggs in the basket of this team winning a premiership. I think they almost have to just roll the dice for one more year, see if they can just do their typical Geelong thing, get into the 4 again, and pull a final series out of their ass. I don't know if they can afford to, you know, click the reset button the year after they've given away 3 first-round draft picks.
it just can't be the same thing as this year. So I just feel like the freshen up needs to come from youth from inside their club. I think it's going to be disastrous if Narkle, Clark and Constable all walk out of the footy club. If that happens, then I go, geez, you're in a rebuild phase. But if they stay and like a Dalhouse and a Higgins and a Rowan and if they move those sort of players on before they move the kids on, then I do have a little bit of optimism because I feel like some of their youth that can come through can freshen up the footy side. But yeah, if those young 20, 21-year-olds walk out of the footy club, I'm going to be really concerned because they don't have draft picks and their top, their aged group and their top age players, their mature players aren't getting it done. So it is really, really concerning, and especially with the sort of attitude and mindset of like Chris Scott in the media recently. He just does not look super inspired and super enthused, and it sort of looks like he's going through the motions, and the way he conducts himself throughout the year has been sort of uninspiring, and I don't know whether he's burnt out or tired, which you would be.
I think he is.
He plays.
It seems like he's just absolutely exhausted, as you would be from losing finals. I don't know if I could deal with the excitement. I've lost 1 finals game in my footy career because I've made 3 final series, won 2 grand finals, lost a preliminary final as skipper, and was bawling my eyes out. I've never been so emotional, other than when my dog died. Like, it was just an uncontrollable amount of disappointment. I was so excited to win a grand final, and to have that disappointment, I couldn't fathom it.
Yep.
So and a big reason why was because I was the captain that year, and I felt like I was bearing a lot of responsibility. And I think if you're Chris Scott, and for a decade straight, or however long it may be, I think we're getting to a decade if it isn't, you've made the finals, top 4 for a big amount of those years, and you just have to deal with that crushing disappointment and feeling like you're personally responsible as a coach year after year. I don't know if you can just keep on going like that.
Yeah, well, 100%. And I think almost the making the prelim that many times almost takes the urgency away from it. Like, the D's have made, I think, only a handful of prelims in 50 years. So when we get there, it's like this urgency to achieve something. And when we get to finals, like, there's this urgency to achieve something. But if you're there every year, you can sort of be like, wasn't our night, we'll come back next year. And I felt like that was a sort of the attitude they had. They weren't playing for their life in that game compared to a hungry Melbourne Football Club. So it's almost been a bit of a sort of negative to their own success in a way that they probably take prelims and finals for granted a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where they land from here next season. It'll be one of the more intriguing off seasons you're likely to see which direction they head. But enough about the D's Geelong game. Let's talk about the doggies, bark, bark, bark. And I don't want to dig the heels in too much, but when you're putting in that incipit of a performance at home for a preliminary final when you promise so much, I think it's fair to say that pretenders is an understatement. So they deserve to have the heels kicked into them at the moment.
Were you absolutely surprised?
Nah, I wasn't surprised in the slightest.
I wasn't either, to be honest.
Even when we were talking last week, and I know it's easy to say this.
Yeah, no, we did. I did buy into Port, especially when they won round 23. I went, they've got home finals. And if they win week one, they've got a home prelim. So a home prelim, they've got to make it. And I sent out a tweet. I said, well, they've beaten Geelong in the qualifier. Port are into a grand final. You've just got to be. They made a home prelim last year, missed out by a kick. They've got a home prelim this year. In COVID years, they've had 2 home prelim finals. So I did buy into it, but I said the other week I would much rather play Port Adelaide than any other side.
Well, how I described it to you during the week was, I think with the way the Demons have played all season, I think they would finish on top of the ladder in most, or at least a lot of seasons. If you go back to pick a year, 2006, you throw this Demons team in there, I think there's a reasonable chance they finish first. Yeah. I think if you take this Port Adelaide crop and you implant them into any other year, I think there's a pretty reasonable chance they don't make the top 4.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought they were pretenders, because I just don't see the quality. They have quality players, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see the quality. I didn't see the assurance in them that I did see in a team like the D's and the Dogs that made me think that, this is a premiership winning team. I didn't see it for a second this year.
And, well, one of their big claims to fame, which, I think it's almost fair enough that they had this opinion, was they won a heap of close games and they put it down to the maturity and experience and getting it done. But a lot of people saw them limping over the line in footy games going, you're not good enough to put teams away. And I think there was something like 4, 5, 6 occasions where they won by 10 or so points, which it didn't scream. The whole season, it didn't really appear that they were a genuine contender until the last couple of rounds where they put together a good patch of form, and you couldn't help but go, well, they have to be now because they've got a home prelim. They have to be a contender now. But after the first 5 minutes of that game, I went, well, hang on, no, this is the Bulldogs and Port playing. This is sort of not surprising.
Well, Port were absolutely shell-shocked, and the Dogs just won the game at the contest. They just wanted 100%. The ball that much more. Then when they got it out to the outside, the Bulldogs had all the pace in the world bouncing away, and Port Adelaide just did not want to defend. It seemed like, of course, they wanted to, and I'd love to know the logic of what actually went wrong there, because to the naked eye, it seemed like Port Adelaide just did not want to win that game of football. When I was watching Melbourne Geelong, I thought Geelong wanted to win the game of football, but they just weren't good enough. They could not go with the D's. When I was watching D's and Port, it's like, have Port even rocked up here? Do they want to win this game of football?
Did you see Kane Cornes was showing clip after clip of players sort of being a step behind the play almost through fear of the contact. Players, Tom Jonas, when we performed quite well against Port on a Thursday night, he had a bit of a nightmare, and I think earlier in the season when Jezza kicked 5 or 6 against the Cats, against another top 4 side, he had a bit of a off day. He can sometimes be found out, and he was flying back. Kane Cornes was showing clips where he's flying back for contests and spoiling it and not trusting teammates to come over the top and defend. He's sort of flying into contests unnecessarily and knocking it into open play. And then they showed other clips of the midfielders just not being awake. And it's either they weren't good enough and never were good enough, or they thought they were into the grand final and were thinking ahead. And which you'd probably rather not be good enough. I think as a Port fan, you'd probably rather put your hand up and accept that throughout the season you probably weren't a contender and weren't good enough. And you'd probably rather have that be the definition than deep down think you were good enough and your team just didn't rock up. Because as I've said before, the D's. We've been in 4 or 5 prelims in 50 years. You've got to take these chances. They don't come around all the time. And if you go to bed as a Port player thinking, oh yeah, we just wasted that opportunity, I feel like that's going to scar you, I reckon.
Yeah, I think it will. And I think they did get carried away with themselves. And that's not just me pulling that out my backside. We did receive an anonymous tip-off this week that, we won't go into it, but apparently the Port Adelaide players got very excited. And when I told you this bit of information, which I won't go into the specifics, you told me you wouldn't see the D's doing that. And I thought you were absolutely right there. So maybe they did get ahead of themselves. But enough about Port Adelaide. The Bulldogs, just once again, irresistible football.
It's very Footscray, the way they're going about it.
Yeah.
It's very gritty. It's very blue collar. It's very working class, their finals series so far.
It's like they're saying, boys, let's just want this ball more, get it down the park, run your guts out, handball, and let's just win this game of football just by pure desire. And they are doing it. And Treloar responded, which was great to see. It was a refreshing of Sam taking those 3-4 bounces, kicking a goal after the criticism he copped during the week. Do you think that criticism was sort of warranted and fair?
Yeah, 100%. Depends. Well, if someone is so good that they get so many runs on the board, potentially you hold off that criticism. Like, I feel like if Dangerfield has an off night, he gets less criticised than a Gary Rowan. So it probably shouldn't have come so harshly because Treloar's got runs on the board. But I felt like all the clips that every footy show showed during the week were pretty damning. He looked very disinterested, and it was a little bit bizarre. But he's come out and responded the way we know Adam Treloar would, and that's why we love him.
Couple of great stories from the Dogs that and once again, romantic for the game. I love seeing the way what Ben Brown's doing at the D's. Rourke Smith,
yes.
Saw this tweet come up. I didn't realise, now he's my favourite player outside of the Carlton Football Club, little known fact. And he has been on 6 straight rookie contracts, 6 straight 1-year rookie contracts, done 2 ACLs in that process. And played, an average of sort of 4 or 5 games a year in that time, if that. And he's come out and it looks like, hopefully he doesn't get dropped, but it looks like there's a big chance of playing in the big dance. Just a story of resilience from Rocky Boy. And then on top of that, the Shaq attack, a man that was written off almost, not quite Liam Jones territory of write-off, considering he was a pick 2. Maybe there was still hope, but he was. I certainly never seen him being a pillar in a premiership or a grand final outfit. And here he is absolutely proving me wrong. And I love being proven wrong because he's playing some decent footy at the moment, the Shackmeister.
Well, they almost tried everyone but him. And they brought like Jamar into the forward line. They brought English into the forward line. They brought like everyone else into the forward line when Josh Shackey was ready and available and fit. And then he cracked into the team by playing in the defence, which was a little bit odd. And he played, okay, but nothing special. And now he's moved back down forward and he's almost playing a defensive role in the forward line. So it is good to see Josh Shackey playing some good footy. And he's, like I've said for years, if I'm going to go back into my old Melbourne brain, for years, a third string semi-no-named forward would always get off the chain against us. I think Bo Wilkes for the Saints kicked bags of fives every time we played them. I remember Harrison Himmelberg when he was quite young. They had Jeremy Cameron, Finn Lace, and another couple of, maybe a Rory Lobb. They had notable names in this GWS forward line, but a Harrison Himmelberg kicked you 4 or 5. So I fear a Josh Shackey performance on grand final day because he's that third string, that sort of lesser name. He's not the Bruce. He's not the Norton. It wouldn't surprise me if the Shaq attack puts together one of the all-time performances.
Puts on a bit of a clinic. It is completely possible. I was saying earlier in the final series when Brisbane was still alive, if they do make it, I would love to see Mitch Robinson run around a grand final. I would just watch him go berserk. And a player that I'm very excited to watch in a grand final, for different reasons to Robbo, is Cody Waitman.
Yes.
He is a man that when he comes... Bulldogs were absolutely unstoppable and were lightning quick and powerful without Waitman and exciting. bring him in, and it just adds another dynamic to their team. He's a man that I think could absolutely light up the grand final and will thrive with the spotlight on him. Who would you say the one player, probably Cozzy Pickett, is a like-for-like with Waitman, but is there a player that, you know, you're very excited to see play in a grand final for the D's that you think could really, you know, shine under that sort of pressure in that sort of game?
It's quite funny when we were drafting Cozzy Pickett, it was sort of out of Cozzy Pickett and Waitman, and it's just so crazy that they both come onto the scene at similar rates. Probably Cozzy Pickett is the easy one. He has a bag of 5 in him. He's kicked 3 and 3 in the finals, and he just looks so exciting and lethal. But and this is probably a little bit of a mainstream answer, but the players that I get so excited about thinking about grand final day is your Track and Oliver. They will leave no stone unturned to try and break this drought. So it's a little bit mainstream, but just those 24 and 25-year-old mids that we've got, I just can't wait to see them go to work.
Yeah. I think Jack Viney has a lot of that sort of bull mentality, just will be willing to do absolutely anything and put his body on his line as well. So I think both teams have players littered with that sort of grand final quality. What did you make of Luke Beveridge's comments after the game? Do you see them regarding all the heat that went to Treloar?
Yeah.
Did you think that's play on?
It was just bizarre. So, I didn't really...
It was bizarre.
I didn't really like Chris Scott's comments midweek. Dr. Peter Larkins tweeted about all this commentary around Tom Stewart being back for the grand final. And Dr. Peter Larkins said, it's insane if they're even bothering trying to rush Tom Stewart back because a Liz Frank surgery takes 12-ish months to get right. So if you're rushing a star like that back, it could be, quite dangerous. Anyway, Chris Scott came out and said some bloke who knows less. Yeah, he gave Peter Larkins a bake. And during the week, I thought that is such a weird sort of thing to focus on, especially, it's just so unnecessary. And he gave Peter Larkins a bake. So Bevo, I know it was a bit defiant and it was a bit, it probably strengthens the bond with him and his players. But it was just one of those ones where it was like, oh God, you just won, didn't you? What are you doing? What did you make of it all?
Well, I've always said that I would so much rather everyone comes out, brings their personality, says exactly what they think, and wherever the cards may fall, well, we'll just play them there. So I love him just coming out, no filter, saying whatever he wants to say. And I know if I was a player, if I was Adam Treloar and I was copying all this hate from the media, and after the game, Bev comes out and he starts not abusing, but he says a clever little line that it implicates the media personalities' wives into it. When I see him going to that extreme, it'd make me feel like I want to run through a brick wall. So if Corns and these sort of types want to come out and absolutely slam Treloar, probably rightfully so for his performance, then I think Bev is in his right mind to come out and say, I don't know how you could sleep next to someone as vindictive as some of these types. So, I was all for it, but I love personalities in the game, and I'd rather see them punching on than pretend like they like each other when we all know they don't.
100%. How do you think this will leave the Port Adelaide Football Club? Obviously, they've got youth on their side compared to Geelong Cats, but if it takes a lot of resilience to come back from this. The Melbourne Footy Club, obviously, we got hammered in a contest, in a prelim against the West Coast Eagles, and it took us 2 years to come back from it, and it really, really rocked the club for a little bit. So it wouldn't be surprising if there was a little bit of scar tissue from this prelim, but I guess they've got the youth, they've got obviously something that's clicking to make top 4 and top 2. So it could just light this fire under the belly that sees them bounce back. But where do you see the Port Adelaide Footy Club at the minute?
Well, they have got the youth, and all these young players will have another year of development. They'll probably be better off for the final series, even though it was demoralising. I don't see them coming out next year and being worse off for that game. The young players, that is. But as for the older players, we're talking your Boaks and your Greys, and even Wines. I know that he's not old. I know that he's not knocking on retirement's door. But Wines has had a year out of the box. Will he replicate this season again next year and be a Brownlow contender? Maybe he will. But if you look at the last 8-10 years of form, however long he's been in the game, it's completely possible that he doesn't have another standout year. Hopefully he does, but it's possible he doesn't. And then, you look at your Boaks and your Greys who aren't getting any younger, and, there are question marks over Dixon. We talked about it last week. Some people think he's overrated. He still kicked 2 goals on the weekend, but, I have too many question marks over Port Adelaide at this stage to see them knocking off a Melbourne or a Dogs, overtaking them next year, or even like a Richmond bursting back into the 8. I see them rebounding back in, and would I back Port system over Richmond's system? I probably wouldn't, to be honest. So, you can never. It's impossible for me or you. 2 blokes who have never played a game of AFL footy in our lives. It's impossible for us to predict what impact this will have on the player's psyche. But all I know is from a fan's perspective, looking at the way they go about it and the way they went about in that prelim, do I see them improving enough to be a premiership winner next year? No. Will they make the top 4 next year? Probably. They probably will. But I just don't see them taking that next step to premiers next year.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's going to be a telling couple of months. It's either going to leave them, really hurt and really sort of damaged by that, or it'll light the fire that could potentially set their, history trajectory in the right direction.
Reading the body language, and I could be I'm no body language expert either, but reading the body language of Ken Hinkley, I don't know if I see a man who comes back next year with more drive and determination and this spurs him onto a premiership.
He was gutted.
I sort of see a man that is just didn't have the answers, didn't know where they were going wrong, didn't know where to even begin to try and change it up and try and wrestle back the momentum to their side.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if this really does demoralise him and makes him question, if we weren't going to do it this year when we have the home final against a team that didn't make the top 4, if we're not going to make it now when we have Boak and we have Gray, still in sort of playing good footy, if we're not going to make it now, when will we ever make it? Maybe we won't. So it wouldn't surprise me if it seriously impacts his belief. We do have written down here on the run sheet just a quick These Dogs preview, but I reckon we do leave that all until next week.
Yeah.
And we jump into our GBOs, McDonald. Do you want to fire us off with your out in the full?
Yeah, my out on the full is the South Australian government in regards to the Western Bulldogs. The Doggies, they got the same treatment that I think Melbourne and a couple other teams got when they went to South Australia, but I don't think they were told about it. So they were hoping to do their captain's run in Adelaide on the Friday night, stay overnight, and then play on the Saturday. But they were told pretty late that, no, you don't get a captain's run the day before. You get a walk on Adelaide Oval the day of the game, but once you get to Adelaide, you got to stay in your hotel rooms the whole time. So they had to reschedule and sort of flip things around and do their captain's run in WA, and it stitched them up a little bit, to be honest. And I think it's a bit average. It's a bit average. I know there's bigger fish to fry than finals footy, but also there's a lot of money and a lot of things that go into the AFL finals that I don't feel like having a team be that disadvantaged is very appropriate. So, the South Australian government in regards to the Bulldogs, I think we're a little bit out of place.
Well said. Well, they got their just desserts in the end anyway. My out in the full is Gary Rowan. Now, I don't like singling out players and, abusing them and jumping on the DMs and saying, "Oh, you pathetic freak." I don't like all that. I don't like all that sort of stuff. So my out in the full isn't directed at him in an insulting way. It's more I love when I'm proven wrong, and I love when Shaki comes out, and I love when your Liam Jones comes out and they prove you wrong. Gary Rowan has this stigma of being a player who doesn't rock up for big games or for finals football. Bit of a downhill skier, they reckon. And he comes out, big preliminary final, and has one disposal, which was a turnover before he's subbed out for a hamstring, which I think it was a hamstring, but it wouldn't surprise me if Chris Scott jumped on the phone and said, "Get Rowan off, tell him he's feeling a bit tight in the string." I know it's silly for us to say because we have no footballing ability whatsoever, but it's crazy to think a man of his ability, he can do crazy things on that football field. To have that stigma of not playing in big games and rock up and only have one disposal before getting subbed out, it is amazing to me that is even a possibility. So, unfortunately, my out in the full is Gaz Rowan.
That's a good out in the full. I think Gary Rowan reminds me of Jake Stringer a lot, and Jake Stringer has put it together, and I think he's sort of over the hill, Jake Stringer. So hopefully Gary Rowan can get it right, because we do like seeing the most exciting players doing the most exciting stuff. I'm going to kick off with my behind, Rogie. Joel Selwood in 2018 against the Melbourne Footy Club in an elimination final cost his team a goal. Tom Hawkins was lining up. It was in the third quarter, and he decked Jake Melksham and James Harms out in the wing, turned it over, and they didn't have the shot on goal. It was just very undisciplined, especially by a leader in a final. And on the weekend, it was the third term. I think the D's had just kicked one. It was starting to really unravel. If it wasn't over, then it was very close to being over. And Joel Selwood's pretty much done the same thing. He's decked Ed Langdon on the wing, an off-the-ball incident by a leader. 50 was given to Bailey Fritsch, and he kicks one from the goal square. So we spoke about Joel Selwood and some of the stuff that he does on field throughout the year, including like the little niggly stuff where he's, eye gouging and sort of roughing people up under the pack. That's all well and good, but I just feel like he's, I don't know whether he's frustrated or whether this is just how he's played for years, but I just felt like from the skipper and from the leader of the Cats, it was a little bit disappointing and a little bit poor, to be honest, to be that undisciplined when his side needed him.
Well said. My behind, as we start to run out of time, is the Bulldogs celebrations. Now, like I said, I love the personality. I love the vision in the room. They're singing Free from Desire. What a track. It looked like something you'd see out of England or something like that. And they're all have a VB in their hand. They're jumping about. I could not love that anymore, and it could very well be a goal. But the only reason why it's my behind is because it's a watch this space. Because you didn't see the Demons doing that. And this shows the clear difference in sort of personalities of the team, I think. For mine, the Demons have this attitude of, we are ultimate professionals and the job's not done until that final siren goes at the grand final, and that's when we'll celebrate. And it seems like, when Gary Lyon was in the room after the game, they weren't all drinking beers, singing Freed from Desire. It looked like they were just still so laser focused on the job at hand. And I'm not saying one way's right and what's wrong, but that's what I think the D's are. And the Dogs are, you fucking Ripper boys, we're into the big dance. We're going to storm into there. We're going to thrash the D's as well, and we are going to celebrate this grand final like no team has ever celebrated before. So it could be my goal, but it's just my behind, because I wonder if the D's way of going about it is probably the way that you want to go about winning a grand final. Yeah,
I absolutely love the vision, but it will be somewhat used against them if they don't get up, which it shouldn't be, to be honest, because as we said, you should celebrate making a prelim. You should celebrate making a grand final. It's an amazing achievement. So I don't feel like it should be, but you just know on the Sunday Footy Show, a bit of Kane Corns will use that. I'm going to kick things off with my goal. My goal, I've got two here. I'm going to go with one in particular. My goal is the umpiring. You can just tell when they sort of lessen the pack of the umpires, and they sort of zero in on the couple that are going to do the couple finals / the grand final, and there's only about 6 umpires left in the season. You can just tell you got the best of the best. I feel like it was just well umpired. They were letting a lot of stuff go, which is the way it should be, especially some of those like high tackles that are sort of pinched and sort of worked for. They were just letting a lot of stuff go, and you could just tell it was the prelim final umpires. You could just tell it was the best of the best, and I felt like both games were umpired quite well.
I couldn't agree more, and I love when we do celebrate the good work of the umpires, because they get bashed too often. My goal, we talked about him earlier, is Jack Viney. He's one of the all-time great men in football, and I love finals players that are just tough as guts, that just will be relentless in their pursuit of a premiership medal. And I think Jack Viney embodied that on the weekend. And I think that he's a big smoky shout for a Norm Smith medal to just crash and bash and wheel your team over the line.
Really excited for the grand final. We'll be back next week to preview it all. It's going to be grand final week next week. That is, it's going to be absolutely absurd. What are you going to get up to between now and then, Rogie?
I'm just going to be texting you 3 times a day, checking in, make sure you haven't had a stroke of excitement, you're staying hydrated. And my job is to support you in supporting the Melbourne Football Club to a grand final up the D.
It is an exciting time to be alive. That is it for another Back Pocket Plugger episode. We appreciate people who tuned in on the Spotifys and iTunes. We appreciate everyone who's watched on the YouTube. And we'll see you all next week to preview the big grand final.
Keep plugging those back pockets.